Hey everyone, it's Scott Rustrolds here for the June 13th edition of the Listen and Learn podcast. As always, thanks for tuning in, and a quick reminder that if you enjoy our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll be alerted every time we post a video each night. And please share the podcast with any friends or family whom you think may be interested in listening along. So with that, I want to focus on two stories of the day, and has kind of been the theme recently, unfortunately. We have one policy story, and then one Russia obstruction of justice, supposed controversy story. So we'll start with that, and that is, of course, today, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, testified in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and this has several interesting takeaways. Well, Sessions has been subject to a ton of leaks and implications that he's corrupt, that he himself may have been doing something illicit with the Russians, and today was a chance for him to clear the record, and he did so rather emphatically. So you had Comey, the FBI director, last week say that for some reason he had a hunch that Jeff Sessions would have to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. And then there came out these stories, of course anonymously sourced, and you just continue to get these leaks that come out and then blast into the microphone of the media that Sessions had an undisclosed meeting with the Russians last year at the Mayflower Hotel after a Trump event. And that would have posed two problems. One, there's a suspicion of why were you meeting with the Russians? And two, he did not disclose that in his forms when he was being nominated for Attorney General. And so that could have opened up to a perjury charge. Well, today, Sessions was quite clear, and his quote was, "I did not have any private meetings, nor do I recall any conversations with any Russian officials at the Mayflower Hotel." So all of these reports that there was a breakout meeting with just him and the ambassador to the U.S., Kislyak, Sessions, without any wiggle room, said there was no such meeting there. And that's a big statement because by being so emphatic, he would open himself up to a clear perjury charge should there have been a set-aside meeting, but there wasn't. And Sessions brought an air of moral indignation that was justified, in my view. And he was quite clear. He said, "This is a secret innuendo being leaked out there about me, and I don't appreciate it. The suggestion that I participated in any collusion, that I was aware of any collusion with the Russian government to hurt this country or to undermine the integrity of our democratic process is an appalling and detestable lie." And so, Sessions really, came out swinging today. And I think that's what we know, and it's understandable. We need to step back. That really, people who are saying there was collusion with the Russians are really saying Americans were acting in a treacherous and traitorous fashion. And you look at guys like Sessions, who have been serving in the public eye for north of 30 years as public servants working to benefit the United States, and it really is a slanderous charge to accuse someone like that of treason. And this is where I think we as a media and as a country need to do a better job of saying, are we just going to allow these slanderous implications and leaks that he had these meetings with the Russians and so on and so forth get out there and tarnish people's image? Or are we going to say that there needs to be hard evidence first? And this is the problem of operating in the public eye versus in the court of law. And then, you find out that a primary source for this supposed intelligence came from a Kislyak cable back to Moscow. But the Russians are notorious for either exaggerating or making up claims in their internal memos when they think the U.S. is listening, if only to try and discover the means of how the U.S. is listening, or to try and create disinformation and confusion within the U.S. intelligence communities. And I'm sure we do the same. You want misinformation so that the intelligence community is wasting time chasing leads that don't exist. So if you have no actual U.S. intelligence and are just relying on the Russians, when we know the Russians are serial liars, you really have to question it. And the whole problem with this investigation is it continues to just be these one-sided stories. It was again like Rubio pointed out last week that somehow, amid all of the leaks, it never leaked out that President Trump himself was never under investigation. So you keep getting these half-truths or mistruths. And finally today you had someone go under oath from the Trump administration to say that this is a bunch of BS, that I did not do these things I've been accused of, and that I've not, and to suggest that I'm a traitor is detestable and should be below our politics. And so I think this was I think the media that was hoping to pin one on Sessions because he's so disliked for his long-running populist views, they didn't get it today. So I'm sure you will not see that much coverage of the Sessions hearing in the days ahead. But once again, we kind of overshadowed a substantive story that was also going on in Capitol Hill, and that's what Defense Secretary James Mattis was saying. And he said two pretty stunning things. First, he said that we are not quote, winning the war in Afghanistan. And it's a pretty remarkable thing for the Secretary of Defense to say that we're not winning a war, that it's turned into a stalemate. And you look at the stats and you have to say he's right. The government of Afghanistan only controls 60% of its territory. That's down from 71% a year ago. ISIS has built up a foothold. And Mattis said, because of this, we're working on a change in strategy. It should be ready to be implemented this summer. But you really have to start asking, very legitimate question of, what is our end game in Afghanistan? 17 years into this almost, and we've still got 10,000 troops there. What is the goal, mission for those troops? Why are we putting Americans in harm's way? How do we define victory? And is victory attainable? What's the cost of that? And I think for all of the focus and justified focus on Iraq in recent years, we've lost sight of Afghanistan and in these critical policy questions of what are we actually trying to achieve there, and is what we want to achieve really that attainable, frankly? Because you don't want to be like Russia in the Soviet Union and bogged down in a perma war that drains resources. So I think that was a stunning thing the Defense Secretary to say. The Afghanistan war continues to be criminally undercovered and underfocused on, and it's something we need to raise the specter on, because we need to ask, why are we putting 10,000 troops in harm's way? And then he also went further and said he was, quote, shocked at the state of our military and our lack of readiness for conflict. And this was a pretty shocking quote. For all of the heartache caused by the loss of our troops during these wars, no enemy in the field has done more to harm the readiness of our military than sequestration. And I do think, the Pentagon, with its nearly $600 billion budget, there should be much more done to audit it and see if there's money that's being wasted internally and refocus those funds towards actual programs that will improve our security. But the fact is, the Pentagon budget has been under strain for several years now with sequestration. It's shrunk the U.S. forces. It's not giving us the capacity to build our Navy back up to 350 ships, which we need. And as we face new threats in the Pacific from a resurgent Russia, a rising China, and then even start thinking about, given the change in the climate and in the North Pole, in the Arctic, you essentially in the summers now will have no ice there. Does that mean that you need different naval capabilities as new trade routes open that way? The U.S. Navy only has one icebreaker, whereas the Russians have several. And these are, the sequestration and poor planning has left our military still battling the wars of the past and not adequately preparing for the conflicts of the future. And Mattis was saying we need to fix that. So you're combining the fact that we have a stalemate in Afghanistan with an overall military that is woefully unready for significant conflict, and we need to ask how can we get defense spending back on track? Plus, this also ties in with Trump calling for NATO members to spend more on defense. We need more burden sharing in the civilized world to face conflicts, and the U.S. can't do it all alone. So I think it's got to be a two-pronged approach of improving and increasing U.S. defense spending, but also getting our allies to spend more on their own defense so we can lift some of those burdens off of the U.S. military. So those are really the two big stories of the day. As always, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to come back tomorrow for the next edition of the Listen and Learn podcast. Have a great night.